heard that sound. Have you ever, and I'm sure you have, heard this season the woeful complaint that they've taken Christ out of Christmas? I'm guessing some of you have. I certainly have. And in fact, for a while there, I bought into that complaint. After all, there was so much commercialism going on, and it was supposed to be a celebration of a spiritual, religious event, the birth of Jesus Christ. So my talk today is going to be a short description of my voyage from that crass complaint to where I am today, I hope, to a better understanding of the meaning of Christmas and the true message to all that Christmas brings. Even if some of us are no longer professing to be real Christians, we nevertheless like to celebrate the birth of the Christ. The word Christmas actually comes not from the Latin, which is where I thought it came from, but from Old English, which means Christian Mass, Christ's Mass. So Christ's Mass traditionally occurred on the evening before Christmas, which we of course now know as Christmas Eve. And it's the end of the 4-week season called Advent. Those of us who aren't Catholic maybe didn't ever learn this in the churches we grew up. But Advent ends with Christmas Eve, Christ's Mass. And the whole purpose of Advent was to get yourself ready to accept the arrival of the Jesus Christ. And therefore, it was a time of fasting. Can you imagine 4 weeks of fasting? And then it culminates with Christ's Mass, at which time feasting begins. From Christ's Mass on, Christmas Eve on. No wonder we eat so much on Christmas Day. It's amazing to me. The word Christ, I've mentioned this before in one of my talks, is not really a part of Jesus' name. It's a title from the Greek meaning anointed one. And what I found out during my research for this talk was the first letter of the word Christ in Greece is X, standing for Jesus or something like that. That's the Greek pronunciation. It's an X. It's a capital X that stands for Jesus. So when you see all those people say Merry Xmas, you don't have to say that's terrible. That's actually a Greek symbol from the name Jesus. So we can set that one aside and not let that bother us anymore, I hope. Now the actual date of the birth of Christ is subject to discussion and has really been discussed a lot, especially in church circles. But to the early Christians in the 3rd century, that date wasn't that important to them. They concentrated on the date that Christ died. Well, in some of the old Jewish traditions, it was told and believed that prophets were conceived and died on the same day, which, if you figure, all right, that's what the Catholic Church, I think, calls the Annunciation. On the moment that Jesus was conceived was, they thought, March 25th. That's kind of when we celebrate Easter, because you're born and died on the same day, supposedly, the prophets in Jewish time. So when you go March 25th, he was conceived then, when would he be born? 9 months later, December 25th. So there's some thought that Christmas Day was based upon some of the pagan celebrations, and some of that may have contributed. But this came from apparently church doctrine. And the church, of course, had to be right, I guess. That's enough history. Let's talk about the joy and celebration of Christmas. If you're like me, you have really enjoyed Christmas morning or Christmas Eve when all the presents got opened and the kids were excited and you were having fun and maybe some good food afterwards. But then do you recall when all the boxes were empty and all the wrapping paper was crushed? Feeling a little let down? It's over. 365 days more to go before the next Christmas. Well, if you do have some regrets about that, you're like me. You forgot something that I didn't pay attention to for a long time, the 12 days of Christmas. It's not just a song. It's actually an event. And I thought it was only the song, and it's kind of a catchy song and fun to sing, but The 12 days of Christmas don't start and end on Christmas Day. They don't start 12 days before and end on Christmas Day. This surprised me. It starts on Christmas Day and goes 12 days into the future to January 6th, which is fortunately called Epiphany. It's when supposedly the being of Christ was first introduced to humanity on the 6th of January. So the 12 days of Christmas is not started yet. It's going to start soon. Well, there's some medieval numerological wit having to do with the 12 Days of Christmas song, if you remember some of the words. When you add up the gifts, all right, there's one partridge in a pear tree, then what? Two turtle doves, then three French hens, then oh my goodness, we're up to 10 already, and we're only through 4 days. So if you go all the way to the 12th day, there are 12 what? Drummers drumming. 12 drummers drumming. So if you go all the way through that and count up all the gifts that are being bestowed up to that point, there are 364 gifts. But it did take you all the way to the next Christmas, except there's 365 days in a year. So apparently the medieval logic was that mere mortals do not have to give a gift on the Christmas day itself. So the 364 days will cover you till next Christmas. But beyond that numerological wizardry, that's hard to say. Beyond that numerological wizardry, the song reminds me that there is so much more that I could actually be doing during this season. And I'll have some ideas about that later. I'll get back to that. When I ask myself, what would Jesus advise me to do about people taking Christ out of Christmas? I believe, and I'm convinced, that he would teach me that the only person with the power to take Christ out of my Christmas is me. I kind of grabbed that one. And the only person that had the power to take Christ out of your Christmas is you. We have the power to keep Christ in Christmas. None of us has to buy into the belief of those who are trying to tell us that their way is the only way to celebrate the season. And let us ignore all the negative Nellies and the commercial barkers who are after your money. And for goodness sake, though, let's not rant and rail against them, because you all know, I'm sure, that anything you really resist will really persist. If you resist, it will persist. So we don't want to have to suffer because of all that outside noise, and we don't want to give it too much of attention. But there are a couple of things that we could do practically, and some of these I mentioned before in prior messages. One of the things you might want to do is something that we're doing regularly in our house now, is whenever a TV ad comes on, mute, glance away. You can pretty well, after a few of them, figure out when they're going to come back to real programming. Another thing you could possibly do is don't watch TV news. Oh my, TV news, especially this coming year, is just going to be all about things that you don't want to participate in, at least not while you're at home enjoying whatever. So mute the TV, avoid TV news, and try turning on some soothing, beautiful background music in your household, even when you're alone, or maybe especially when you're alone. We can choose to concentrate on those parts of this season that truly inspire us. Family, food, fun, the beautiful lights, the magnificent music, really magnificent, and the giving of ourselves and our gifts to others. As Vivian indicated in the most recent Inquiring Mind article, we also need to concentrate on hope, faith, peace, love, joy. And if we're concentrating on that, then it'd be very easy to ignore all this other noise. And we are putting Christ back into our Christmas. I mentioned earlier about the 12 days. This is the first Christmas season that I'm trying to modify the way that I give. And so, yeah, we're still doing a lot of the usual giving, and we'll continue to do that. But I'm trying to expand who I give to and how I give to them. One thing that I'm doing, our oldest son in Palm Springs area told us about a friend of theirs from church who he just lost his wife, and he didn't have sufficient funds to pay for her memorial. So as their Christmas present, we're sending some money, not enough to cover the whole, but some money. It's something I've never done before, especially not at Christmas time. And I intend to continue making a few other donations to a few of the others that have solicited our help over this last year, and they include some of the following. The Carter Center, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, they're trying to get peace worldwide and alleviate human suffering worldwide, a worthy goal. The American Red Cross, they do so much, have done so much for people in the past, and will do so much in the future for those facing catastrophic loss. The Nature Conservancy, who help to protect and restore the lands and waters around us. And one of my favorites, SAY, which is a local organization called Social Advocates for Youth. They bring light and hope and some food, shelter, clothing, etc. to many vulnerable youth and children in our community. But even if I do all that, our son's friend and those 4 organizations, that's only 5. I got 7 more days to cover. So I got my work cut out for me, and I haven't yet figured out how I'm going to do it. But I intend to do whatever I can to share some of my treasure, some of my talent, some of my time, and certainly a lot of my thoughts. Those are the 4 T's we talk about a lot here at Church of the Oaks, and I'm going to figure out ways of doing that over those 12 days. I've got the first 5 days covered, so I've got about a week to figure it out. I know that there are many other worthy causes that you folks are all supporting, have and will in the future, and are this season. Let me encourage you to continue, and let me not challenge you, but let me suggest that you might want to consider doing something along the lines of what I finally decided to do for myself, and see about stretching out your 12 days of Christmas. And maybe even beyond, who knows? Now that we are all better prepared to do our part to keep Christ in Christmas, let's make sure we recognize that ours is not the only show in town. There's more to this season than merely Christmas. Christmas is absolutely a highlight, but starting today and running until the end of the month is Hanukkah. And our Jewish friends are going to celebrate that 8-day miracle of the burning oil every day of that 8-day period. And then there is Kwanzaa, which some of the African Americans in our community celebrate. They have 7 principles that really, if you live by them, you'd be doing pretty darn good. And they celebrate from December 26th to January 1. And they do something similar to the candelabra in the Hanukkah celebration. And many of us metaphysicians, some of you here, recognize that Christmas is about the birth of the Christ consciousness within the human soul. We talk about that a lot in our Namaste greeting. We talk about the divine within, and that's basically what Christmas is about for metaphysicians. It talks about the birth of the Christ consciousness at our center. And if we center in on that center, we cannot help but to be more Christ-like. So, with all that said and done, I want to wish to all of you here and anyone elsewhere happy holidays, which really covers everything when you think about it, and happy Hanukkah, and Merry Kwanzaa, and for goodness sake, Merry Christmas to all. Namaste. Well, that's fun. you're a good group, huh? All right, it's time now to do some more singing as we wrap up this session. And we will sing I Heard the Bells, number 278, in the Wings of Song. And we're going to ask you to do the first and third verses only. I knew there was a word coming out. Have a stand. Stand up, please. First and third verses.